The sound of dishes clattering filled the air as I stood in the kitchen, wiping my damp hands on a towel that had long lost its color. The afternoon light spilled through the narrow window, catching the steam rising from the sink, and for a moment, I let my mind wander to a time when this house felt like home, when laughter didn't echo like mockery, and when I wasn't treated like an invisible shadow. "Don't forget to scrub the counters," her voice snapped behind me, slicing through my thoughts like a cold blade. "You missed a spot yesterday. I don't want my kitchen looking filthy." I turned slightly. She stood there, Clara, my daughter-in-law. Perfect hair, perfect nails, and a perfectly condescending smirk that always made me feel like I was intruding in my own home. "Yes, Clara," I replied softly, keeping my voice steady, my hand still moving across the counter. She crossed her arms. "You don't have to pretend to be polite. You're just the maid here anyway." Her words stung, even though I had learned to expect them. The maid. That was what I had become to her, in this house that my late husband and I had built with our own hands, in the same kitchen where I had cooked for my son when he was just a boy. My son Ethan walked in just then, loosening his tie after a long day. "Hey, Mom," he said warmly, brushing a kiss on my cheek before turning to Clara. "You okay?" Clara smiled sweetly, a performance only he ever seemed to buy. "Of course, darling. Just making sure your mother doesn't overwork herself." Overwork myself? If only he knew how those words twisted inside me. But Ethan was blind in love, or perhaps too tired to notice the silent war that brewed under his roof every single day. After dinner, as the couple retreated upstairs, I sat at the table alone, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. The house felt foreign now. The walls once held family portraits. Now they displayed abstract art Clara had chosen, cold and expensive, much like her personality. I sipped my tea, watching the reflection of the chandelier in the cup. A thought crossed my mind, one I had ignored for months. Maybe it was time she learned who really owned this place. But I wasn't ready, not yet. The next morning, I woke early, as always. The house still slept while I prepared breakfast, eggs, toast, and Ethan's favorite black coffee. The aroma drifted upstairs. Moments later, Clara appeared, wrapped in a silk robe. "Did you iron my dress?" she asked flatly, scrolling through her phone. "I didn't know you wanted it ironed," I replied. Her eyes lifted slowly, locking onto mine with that same venomous chill. "You live here rent-free. The least you can do is act useful. Rent-free! If only she knew." I wanted to laugh, but instead, I smiled faintly and said, "Of course, Clara." When Ethan joined us, she was sweetness again, laughing, touching his arm, playing the doting wife. I quietly placed his coffee on the table and turned away before the ache in my chest could deepen. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard them arguing. Her voice was sharp, his weary. Something about money, bills, responsibilities. Ethan had always been a good man, but I could tell Clara's thirst for status was draining him. Expensive vacations, designer clothes, endless remodeling. And though he never said it aloud, I could feel his guilt for having me here. The next morning, the doorbell rang. A courier. A thick envelope addressed to Mrs. Margaret Ellis. My name. Clara took it before I could reach the door. "Who's this from?" she asked. "Just some bank papers," I said casually, taking it from her hand. Her suspicion flickered for a moment, but she shrugged. "As long as you're not causing trouble." I smiled quietly and walked to my room. Inside the envelope was a renewal document, proof that the house deed, every inch of this property, was still in my name. For a moment, I just stared at the papers. I had kept this secret for years, letting Ethan and Clara think they owned it because it made them happy. But happiness built on arrogance never lasts. That evening, Clara threw a small dinner for her friends. Loud, shallow laughter filling the air as they sipped wine and talked about handbags. I stayed mostly in the kitchen, serving plates. At one point, I overheard one of her friends whisper, "Who's that? The maid?" Clara chuckled softly. "Oh, just my mother-in-law. She likes to keep herself busy." A ripple of laughter followed, and something inside me broke, Not from pain, but from awakening. I looked at her, beautiful, smug, self-assured, and realized that tomorrow she would learn the truth. And when she did, it wouldn't be loud. It would be calm, polite, and unforgettable. That night, I placed the deed on the dining table and went to sleep. Tomorrow would be different. Morning sunlight crept through the blinds as I made my way to the kitchen. My steps were steady, but my heart raced, not from fear, but from resolve. For the first time in months, I felt something powerful stirring inside me. Dignity. Clara was already awake, sitting at the table with her coffee. Her hair was perfectly styled, her lips painted a cruel shade of confidence. When her eyes met mine, they flicked the papers lying on the table. "What's that?" she asked, suspicion curling around every word. "Oh, those?" I said, pretending to be casual as I poured myself tea. "Just some old documents I found while cleaning." She reached out, snatching them before I could stop her. Her eyes scanned the page, and slowly, beautifully, her face began to lose color. This is the house deed," she stammered. "In your name?" "Yes," I replied gently, stirring my tea. "It's been mine since your husband was 5. Your remodeling, your decorations, your furniture, all resting under my roof." Her jaw tightened, but she forced a smile. "That can't be right. Ethan and I took over the mortgage years ago." I tilted my head, almost pitying her. "You never asked who paid it off, did you?" For once, Clara didn't have a ready answer. Ethan walked in then, still buttoning his shirt. "Morning, what's going on?" Clara shoved the papers toward him. "Tell me this isn't true, that your mother owns the house." He frowned, scanning the documents. His eyes widened slightly, and then he looked at me with confusion. "Mom, I thought you transferred everything after Dad passed?" I smiled softly. "I never said that, dear. I only said I'd handle the bills." The silence that followed was exquisite. Clara's face contorted between disbelief and fury. "So what, you've been letting us live here like tenants?" "No," I said. "Like family. But family doesn't call each other maids." Her lips parted, but no words came out. The air in the room had changed. Heavy, electric, undeniable. Ethan tried to step in, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, this doesn't change anything, right? We're all—" "Oh, it changes everything," Clara snapped. "We've been making decisions in this house as if it were ours. Remodeling, hosting, spending thousands." "Yes," I interrupted calmly, "on a home that doesn't belong to you." Clara turned on her heels, storming toward the stairs. "This is ridiculous. You can't just spring this on us like some power game." I followed her slowly, my voice quiet but firm. "I didn't make it a game, Clara. You did. The day you looked me in the eye and said I was just the maid." She froze. Her hand trembled on the stair railing. For a moment, she looked smaller, fragile even, like a child caught in her own lie. Later that day, the tension hung thick in the house. Ethan tried to keep peace, but Clara was cold, pacing the living room like a trapped cat. When her friends called, she declined every invitation. By evening, she couldn't stand it anymore. She stormed into the kitchen, where I was peeling potatoes for dinner. "You think this makes you superior?" she hissed. "You think owning a house gives you power over me?" I didn't look up. "No, Clara. Respect gives power. You lost that long before today." Her voice cracked, trembling between rage and humiliation. "You've been waiting for this, haven't you? To humiliate me in front of Ethan, to take control back." I turned to face her then, calm, steady. "No, I've been waiting for you to remember kindness. But since you couldn't, I had to remind you where you stand." Her eyes glistened. Whether it was anger or shame, I couldn't tell. Dinner was quiet that night. Ethan tried to act normal, talking about work, pretending nothing had changed. But everything had. Clara barely ate. She kept glancing at me, at the papers still sitting on the counter, like a ghost haunting her pride. When I retired to my room, I heard muffled voices behind their door. Clara's sharp tone, Ethan's frustration. "You knew, didn't you? You let her stay here out of pity. Clara, please, lower your voice." "No." She's playing you, Ethan. She's playing us both. Their argument lasted late into the night. I didn't feel victorious, only free. The truth had done what I couldn't, revealed her cruelty under the bright light of reality. A few days passed. Clara avoided me, moving around the house like a restless ghost. But one morning, she knocked on my door. "Can we talk?" she said softly. I gestured for her to come in. She sat on the edge of the chair, fingers twisting nervously. I didn't know the house was yours. I guess I said some things I shouldn't have. It was an apology, though one wrapped in pride. I nodded. We all say things we regret. What matters is whether we mean the apology. She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." I studied her face. Young, tired, still learning. "Thank you, Clara." For a brief moment, peace returned. But it was fragile, and I knew it. People like Clara don't change overnight. Sure enough, a week later, the calm cracked. I overheard her on the phone, whispering to a friend. "She's milking it, you know. Acting like some saint just because she owns the house. If Ethan had any sense, he'd make her move out." And there it was, the truth again, spoken in poison. That night, I decided. Enough was enough. If she truly wanted to see what power looked like, she would. Tomorrow, she would wake up to a letter. One that would decide who really stayed and who left. The morning air was crisp when I placed the envelope on the kitchen counter. I didn't need to sign it dramatically or announce my intentions. Some truths are best discovered in silence, the kind that makes people listen harder. I went about my usual routine, making tea, watering the small plants by the window, folding the laundry Clara never bothered with. The house was peaceful, deceptively so, but I knew the storm was coming. It arrived at exactly 8:07 a.m. Clara's voice sliced through the quiet like glass breaking. "What the hell is this?" she screamed, waving the letter in the air. Ethan came running, half dressed for work, his tie dangling loosely around his neck. "What's going on?" She thrust the paper at him, trembling with fury. "Read it! Read what your mother just did!" Ethan's eyes flicked over the page, his face shifting from confusion to disbelief. He looked at me, searching for an explanation. "It's a formal notice," I said, calmly sipping my tea. "A 30-day move-out request. I'm selling the house." You're what?" he stammered. I smiled faintly. "Selling it. I've lived here long enough to see it turn into something unrecognizable. I think it's time I start over." Clara's face turned crimson. "You can't do this. Where are we supposed to go?" I shrugged. "I believe you once said you didn't need me, that I was just the maid. Well, maids don't own the house they work in, but I do, and I've decided to move on." Ethan stepped forward, trying to calm me. "Mom, please, you don't have to do this. Let's just talk." I looked at him, my tone soft but firm. "No, Ethan, you had plenty of chances to talk. You chose silence while your wife disrespected me under your roof. Now, I choose peace." Clara scoffed bitterly. "Peace? You're throwing us out. How's that peace?" I stood, meeting her eyes without flinching. "It's peace for me, and maybe someday, a lesson for you." For the next few days, tension flooded every corner of the house. Clara packed things angrily, slamming drawers and muttering curses under her breath. Ethan spent most of his time at work, avoiding confrontation. I didn't blame him. He'd never been good at facing uncomfortable truths. But truth has a way of following you, no matter how far you run. One afternoon, a real estate agent came by. A kind woman named Marissa, cheerful and efficient. Clara watched her walk through the house, measuring, taking photos, commenting on the lovely structure. When Marissa left, Clara exploded. "How can you be so heartless? Do you enjoy this? Watching us scramble?" I turned to her, folding the dish towel in my hands. "No, Clara, I'm doing what I should have done long ago, setting boundaries." She let out a bitter laugh. "Boundaries? You mean revenge?" I sighed, looking at her tired, angry face. "No, revenge requires hate. I don't hate you. I pity you." For a moment, she looked stunned. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to speak, but the words never came. The next morning, I found a note on the kitchen table. It wasn't from Clara, it was from Ethan. Mom, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry for how things turned out. I thought keeping peace was the same as doing right. I see now that silence can be just as cruel. I'll find another place soon, but I hope you'll forgive me one day. I folded the note carefully, placing it in the drawer beside my teacups. I didn't cry. Instead, I smiled, a quiet, bittersweet smile of a mother who finally chose herself. As the days passed, I began sorting through my belongings. Old photos, my late husband's watch, the small keepsakes from Ethan's childhood. Every item carried a story, one that reminded me how far we had drifted from love to obligation. One evening, as I was boxing up some books, Clara appeared in the doorway. Her voice was low, almost tired. You really mean to go through with it? Yes, I said, not looking up. She hesitated. I know I said things I shouldn't have. Maybe I let pride get in the way. She trailed off, her voice breaking. I didn't realize how much this house meant to you. I looked at her finally. It's not the house, Clara. It's what it stood for. Respect, family, belonging. You took that and turned it into something small. She blinked, fighting tears. I didn't mean to. Maybe not, I said gently. But intention doesn't erase impact. Clara nodded slowly, then turned away. I guess I'll start looking for a new place tomorrow. I watched her go, and for the first time, I saw not arrogance, but regret. The day they moved out, I stood by the window. A moving truck idled in the driveway. Ethan loaded boxes in silence, while Clara stood beside him, her shoulders slumped. Before leaving, Ethan walked over and hugged me. I'm sorry, Mom. I nodded, holding him for a long moment. I know, dear. Take care of yourself. Clara didn't say anything. She just glanced at me once. Her eyes filled with a complicated mix of anger and sorrow, and got into the car. When the truck pulled away, the house felt still. For the first time in years, silence didn't feel oppressive. It felt peaceful. That evening, I sat in my favorite chair, a cup of tea warming my hands. The air smelled of freedom and a little bit of finality. Marissa called the next day. You've got an offer, Mrs. Alden. A good one. Are you ready to sell? I looked around the house. The memories, the echoes of laughter, even the scars of arguments past. Yes, I said softly. It's time. When I hung up, I whispered to the empty room, Goodbye, old friend. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like someone's maid. I felt like a woman who had finally remembered her worth. 2 weeks later, the for sale sign stood firmly in the front yard, glinting in the late afternoon Sunday. Neighbors whispered, curious about why the Alden home, a place known for Sunday dinners and blooming gardenias, was suddenly up for sale. I didn't bother explaining. Some stories were best left to silence and time. The house began to empty slowly, like a heart learning to beat differently. I donated Ethan's old toys, gave the neighborhood children a few of my plants, and kept only what truly mattered, the items that carried warmth, not weight. But even as I prepared to leave, I couldn't escape the flicker of doubt that sometimes crept in at night. I would wake up in my quiet room, wondering if I had been too harsh, if maybe, beneath Clara's arrogance, there was a woman desperate to be seen. I brushed the thought away. Compassion doesn't mean you have to stay where you're disrespected. Still, when the phone rang one rainy afternoon, my hands trembled slightly as I answered. It was Ethan. Mom, he said softly, we found a small apartment. It's not much, but it's something. I wanted to say thank you. For what? I asked. For teaching me something I should have learned years ago. That respect isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about standing up for what's right. A lump formed in my throat. I'm proud of you, Ethan. He hesitated before adding, Clara wanted to say something too. There was a pause. Then Clara's voice came on, cautious, quiet. Mrs. Alden, I just wanted to say, I was wrong about everything. You didn't deserve how I treated you. I thought I was protecting my marriage, but really, I was just protecting my ego. For a moment, I said nothing. The sound of the rain filled the space between us. Finally, I said, "Clara, I appreciate your honesty. That means more than you think. I hope you can forgive me someday," she whispered. I smiled faintly, though she couldn't see it. Someday starts today. When I hung up, I felt lighter, not because I wanted them back, but because closure had arrived in the form of humility. The next day, Marissa brought the final paperwork. I signed everything slowly, savoring the finality of each pen stroke. "Congratulations," she said, shaking my hand. "You're officially free." "Free," I repeated softly. The word felt foreign and beautiful on my tongue. I spent my last evening in the house, walking through each room one final time. The kitchen, where I'd made countless breakfasts. The hallway where Ethan used to run as a child. The guest room that had become Clara's kingdom of complaints. Every space held a story, but none of them owned me anymore. When I reached the front door, I turned around. "Thank you," I whispered to the walls, the floors, the memories, "for everything you taught me, even the hard parts." I locked the door, placed the key gently on the counter for the new owners, and walked out. Outside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of lilacs. My small suitcase sat on the porch beside a cab waiting by the curb. As I got in, the driver, a cheerful woman named Rosa, smiled at me through the rearview mirror. "Big move?" she asked. "Biggest one yet?" I said with a small laugh. "Starting over, huh?" I nodded. Starting right this time. We drove off slowly, the house shrinking behind me until it was just another shape in the rearview mirror. One chapter closing quietly, gracefully. A few months passed, and I settled into a cozy apartment in a quieter town by the sea. It was small but warm, with lace curtains and a balcony that caught the morning sunday. I spent my days reading, tending to flowers, and walking along the beach. I even made friends with the lady next door, Margaret, a retired teacher with a laugh that could chase away any gloom. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I received a letter. No return address, just my name, written neatly across the envelope. Inside was a short note and a photo. Ethan, Clara, and their newborn daughter. In the photo, Clara held the baby close, her smile soft and genuine, so unlike the woman I once knew. The note read, "Mom, meet Lily. We named her after Dad's favorite flower. Clara wanted you to know she makes your soup recipe every Sunday now. We'd love for you to visit soon." Tears welled up in my eyes. I placed the photo on my bedside table, beside the small ceramic bird that Ethan had made for me in 3rd grade. Life had a strange way of circling back, not to where you began, but to where you were meant to be. Weeks later, I decided to visit. When I arrived at their modest home, Clara greeted me at the door with a nervous smile. "Welcome," she said quietly. The smell of stew filled the house. "It smells familiar," I said. "It's your recipe," she replied almost shyly. "The one you used to make on Sundays." Ethan appeared with the baby in his arms. "She's missed her grandma," he said softly. I took Lily in my arms, so small, so warm, so pure, and felt something inside me melt completely. As I sat there, surrounded by the gentle hum of family, I realized that forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It just makes room for something better to grow. That night, as we shared dinner together, Clara raised her glass awkwardly. "To new beginnings," she said. I smiled. "And to lessons learned." The clinking of glasses filled the air, followed by laughter, genuine, not forced. It wasn't the same as before. It was better, real. And in that moment, I understood something that took me a lifetime to learn. Sometimes, the people who break your heart are the same ones who help rebuild it, if you're brave enough to let them try. Months slipped by like gentle tides, and my life found a new rhythm. The bitterness that once clung to me had dissolved into quiet peace, the kind that doesn't shout but hums softly inside the heart. Every morning, I brewed my tea and watched the sunrise from my balcony. The golden light stretched across the sea, painting everything in warmth. It reminded me that healing, much like dawn, comes not with noise but with patience. One morning, as I was watering the small row of daisies outside, My neighbor Margaret called from her porch. "Eleanor, dear, there's a package for you." I walked over curious. It was a beautifully wrapped box with a handwritten tag, "From the three of us, with love." Inside was a framed photo, all of us together. Ethan, Clara, baby Lily, and me, sitting around the dinner table, smiling. Beneath it, a small engraved plaque read, "Family isn't about where you live. It's about how you love." I couldn't help but cry, not from sadness, but from the sweet realization that life had quietly mended what pride once broke. A week later, they came to visit. Lily had grown chubby and curious, reaching for everything within sight. Clara was glowing, more grounded and humble. Ethan, as always, looked at me with that childlike love I thought I'd lost forever. We spent the afternoon together by the beach. Clara helped me pack sandwiches. Ethan carried the picnic basket, and Lily chased the waves with tiny, stumbling feet. At one point, Clara turned to me and said softly, "I never told you this, but after you sold the house, I couldn't sleep for weeks. I kept seeing your face when you walked away. It haunted me." I looked at her gently. "Sometimes guilt is the soul's way of asking for grace." She nodded. "I just want you to know, I learned from you about dignity, boundaries, and love that doesn't need control." I smiled, and I learned that sometimes walking away isn't punishment. It's the only way to be heard. The waves lapped quietly against the shore. Lily squealed with joy as a seagull swooped low, and Ethan laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in years, full and free. In that laughter, I found peace. As the sun began to set, Clara took a deep breath. "You know," she said, "we've been talking about buying a small place again. Nothing big, but somewhere we can build real memories. And we'd love for you to live close by." I raised an eyebrow, teasingly. "Close enough to visit? Or close enough to argue again?" Clara laughed, shaking her head. "Close enough to make Sunday dinners a tradition. Only this time, I'll be the one cooking," Ethan added, "and I'll be doing the dishes." I chuckled softly. "Then maybe it's a deal." As the sky turned shades of orange and pink, I held Lily close, breathing in the scent of salt and sunshine. That night, after they left, I sat by my window watching the moon rise. I thought about all that had happened, the arguments, the silence, the sale, the redemption. Life had come full circle in its own imperfect, miraculous way. I realized that the greatest revenge isn't anger or triumph, it's peace. True, quiet, unstoppable peace. The next morning, I took that framed photo from my table and hung it on the wall, right above the small wooden sign that read, "Home is not a place. It's a feeling." And for the first time in a long, long while, I truly felt home.